whatsoever? Answer me, please.
No, sir.
Okay. Have you any testable proof of your God? Do you possess any demonstrable, solid evidence whatsoever to prove any justification for your belief in your God?
Well, no, sir, I don't, but you see...
Have you any scientific proof whatsoever to support your position that there is a God?
Well, no, sir, I'm afraid I haven't.
You're afraid? You're afraid you haven't?
Well, yes, sir. I mean, no, sir.
Yet you still believe in him.
Well, yes, sir. Yes, I do.
Now that takes faith. Now the whole class is laughing and giggling. The professor smiles. He looks around. He looks back to the student, and then he moves in for the kill. Son, it is clear from your own statements that according to the rules of testable, demonstrable protocol, science says your God doesn't exist. What do you say to that one? Well, young man, where's your God now? Sit down, please. And the student sits down, defeated. But now, is God a problem for science? Let's go to Islam Today and see. Remember, you can visit us on the web at www.islamtoday.com and find the answer to these and many questions about the correct belief in Allah, in Islam, and what are the Muslims. Now, to deal with this question today, this is called the answer to the problem science has with God. And again, we're still in the classroom of Professor I.M. Kathar, when a young Muslim student stands up, turns and looks to the class, and he says, "Professor, may I address the class?" The professor turns and looks, noticing his beard and his kufi, and he says, "Aha, a Muslim in the vanguard. Come, young man, speak some proper wisdom to our gathering." The Muslim looks around the room. There's some interesting points that you're making, sir. Now, I've got a question for you. You have a question for me? Yes, sir. Is there such a thing as heat? Heat? Of course there's heat. Okay, you're right, sir. Is there such a thing as cold? Son, where are you going with this? Yes, there's such a thing as cold. It's the opposite of heat. No, sir, there isn't. The professor's grin freezes. The room goes cold. Everybody's staring at the young Muslim standing there. Sir, according to science, you can have a lot of heat, more heat, superheat, mega heat, white heat, a little heat, or no heat. But according to science, there's no such thing as cold. You can go down to as low as 458 degrees below zero. This is called absolute zero. There is no heat, but you cannot go any colder than that. So according to science, there's no such thing as cold. Otherwise, we would be able to go past 458 degrees below zero. You see, sir, according to science, cold is only a word we use to describe the absence of heat. We cannot measure cold. We can only measure heat. And this is measured in thermal units because heat is an energy, whereas cold is just the absence of heat. So according to science, cold doesn't exist. It is just the absence of heat. Sir, may I ask another question? Yes, go ahead. Is there such a thing as darkness? Well, now that's a dumb question, son. What is night if it isn't darkness? What are you trying to get at? So you say there is such a thing as darkness, sir? Yes, of course. Sir, according to science, you're wrong again. What? No, sir. Darkness is not something. It is the absence of something. You can have low light, normal light, bright light, flashing light, but you have no light at all. Then you call this condition darkness. But it is a condition without light. We just use the word darkness to describe that. If this were the case, if darkness exists, I could ask you to give me a jar of darkness. What? Well, sir, stop and think. If I ask you to give me light, you could give me a candle, a match, a flashlight, a lamp. All of these things are light, and you could turn those on and you could present them. But can you present any darkness? Sir, can you give me a jar of darkness? No answer. Would you mind telling me what your point is, young man? Yes, Professor, my point is that your philosophical premise is flawed to start with, so your conclusion is also in error. The professor starts to go ballistic. Flawed? How dare you? Sir, may I explain what I mean? Oh, explain. Sir, you're working on the premise of duality. For example, you're saying that there is life and then there's death. You mention good and evil as though it comes from two different places and has two different aims or purposes, like a good God and a bad God. You're viewing the concept of God as something finite, something you can measure. Sir, science cannot even explain a thought, yet we know they exist. Science cannot show you electricity. It can only show you what electricity or magnetism can do. But you cannot see them. You cannot taste them. And so on. To view death as the opposite of life is to be ignorant of the fact that death cannot exist as a substantial thing. Death in this life is not the opposite of life. It is merely the end of life as we know it here on earth. So, what if it were to continue in another form after the body dies and the soul continues? So your concept of a human-type God with the same principles, or lack of principles, and goals as a human being would have obviously be impossible. Likewise, any concept of God which puts God in the creation or compares to what has been created or sustained by the same God would naturally be contested by a scientific mind. After all, how could God have his own God? Let me put it in another way. Let us change the terminology a bit and use the proper word, creator, in place of your word, God. This will give us the proper perspective of what we're trying to understand. If you have a creation, then it follows that you have a creator. Isn't that correct, sir? The professor just stares at the Muslim without any comment or movement. Sir, let us take a look around and observe all that exists. Where did everything come from? A piece of floating rock that explodes, and from this great bang, everything comes into a perfect order? Millions upon millions of solar systems and galaxies all operating on orbital systems beyond human imagination are formed out of an accident? How would this be possible? How? You see, this is a theory. But is it based on scientific approach? Or is it just another attempt to deny that there is a supreme creator and a designer of all that exists? Isn't this really a form of denial? Could this be another cover-up to hide the fact that we did not create ourselves and that we do not truly sustain ourselves? In fact, we today, with all our technology, can still not create even one single atom. We cannot create even a molecule of protein. One molecule of protein, and it's impossible for us to create it. We can change things, we can convert things, but we cannot create from nothing. Most important, to deny that we should acknowledge and praise the one who created all this and gave it to us in the first place. Sir, if you deny the creation, then you must deny your own existence. Isn't this also true? Of course not. Just because we exist doesn't mean we were created. Oh? Then if we were not created and there's no creation, how do you explain all the wonders of the very thing you claim to teach, science? I'm talking about the miracles in science that occur throughout the universe, sir. Now, by now, the professor's face is turning a very red color, and he's so angry that he can't talk. The Muslim continues. Regarding the existence of everything, if you said that everything came out of a solid mass or a huge rock that exploded, still we'd have to ask the question, where did the rock come from? Or where did the mass come from? How did it get there? Did it make itself? So there must have been something already there. And where did it come from? And who created it? Could you explain, sir, please, for the class, how something comes out of nothing? Of course, the professor doesn't comment. The Muslim continues. Science is not just a study of that which we